We'll go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us today. In our time together today, we're going to be talking about what you might do on the first day of class, or perhaps even what you could be doing now to set things up for that first day of class. There are a lot of things that are changing and swirling around us, but I think that a little bit of preparation right now and reflection together can only help, right? Can only help us to feel better. I want to talk for a few minutes and set up our time together. I'm going to do that by sharing my screen. So here we go. Carrie, you're going to have to enable me to do that since you are the host.
You should be good now.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. All righty. I think you should be able to see my screen in just a minute. Somebody give me a thumbs up there and let me know. All righty, awesome. So what to do on the first day. I want to start us off today by thinking about a purpose, task, criteria framework. If you know me at all or have been with me through any other workshops, you might recognize this from Transparent Teaching Design. The purpose, task framework kind of orders our time and helps us think through where we're going. So today, our purpose is to overview some of the policies and practices that we should know as we prepare for that first day. Our tasks, in other words, what are we going to do during our time together? We're going to discuss a lot of things. So on this list, I have facial coverings, required elements on syllabi, seating assignments, cleaning, room layout, exit procedures from the classroom, online welcomes, and camera use. But let me suggest to you that this is not all. I would really like for our conversation to be emergent. So if we have other questions, we're going to tackle those too. And then the criteria portion of this framework means how will we know we did what we set out to achieve? If this workshop is successful, I hope that you leave with clarification, perhaps on policies related to the first day and some tangible resources. But I have a few disclaimers, and that is this. I am not the expert. What I know is that I'm better when others join me. So today I'm joined by three people who will particularly be helpful in this conversation. And that is Matt Gregory, our Dean of Students, Justin Louder, the Associate Vice Provost of eLearning and Academic Partnerships, and Meredith Imes, who is our, I hope I say this big title, fancy title right, Meredith, the Interim TTU COVID-19 Coordinator. I think that's pretty close.
Perfect.
There we go. So Meredith, Justin, and Matt are going to jump into the chat in particular, and then also verbally and help us crowdsource answers. You're here today too, and I'm guessing that between all of us in the room, we have a lot of expertise and we can work through this together. So I don't put myself forward as the end-all be-all to these policies. They're changing daily, as is our entire situation. You know, even yesterday, we got a memo from the Office of the Provost with an FAQ announcing some more information that we've all been asking. So even as late as yesterday, we got new things. So I want you to know that by design for this workshop, I mean for us to have an active chat. I mean for us to have discussion. The PowerPoint is very simple, purposefully, because we have a lot of text-heavy slides and there's no need to do anything fancy. Same thing with the technology. We're just using a Zoom session. We're not even going to break out into breakout rooms. We'll just all be in this room together and we'll work through this. Following the session today, I will share the PowerPoint with you. There may be some elements that you can just copy and paste right into your syllabi. I'll also keep a list of resources that might be relevant to you, and I'll send those out as well. So following the session, you can expect to hear from me today. So first off on our list is Matt Gregory. Matt is about to run to the law school, or maybe jump on virtually with the law school next after us. So I asked him if he would start off by talking about the Texas Tech facial covering policy and talk about wearing masks. Matt, can I pass to you?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Suzanne.
Sure.
I appreciate the opportunity to join all of you and speak with you about this. I know probably student compliance with wearing masks and social distancing is something that might be on all of our minds that are on this particular webinar. So it's on my mind too, and having daily conversations about it. But I wanted to share a few bits of information that I think might go a long way and be helpful in terms of garnering compliance within the classroom of our students. As you can see in front of you on the slide is a syllabus statement with some recommended language that we came up with for anyone who is going to be teaching a course in the fall to put that on. Now, naturally, if someone's teaching an online course, that might not be as necessary, but I still think we should put it in there just as a reminder that even in our home communities, even if we're not here on campus proper, we still need to be social distancing and wearing masks. So I don't think it's a bad reminder at all for even our online or flex hybrid modalities. But that is a pretty comprehensive syllabus statement that covers the expectations, that covers the regulations from the state and from the local health department here in Lubbock. Outside of that, I think we have discussed about approaching this in a very educational way. From the beginning of conversations back in March and April about what the fall might look like, I heard time and time again about wanting to educate and have an educational approach with our students when we're talking about the compliance with some of our healthy and safety provisions. So, there's a few things we can do. We can email our class. If we have the syllabus statement already built in, we can email the class to copy the syllabus, point out specifically that there is a mandated and required expectation for students attending in-person or even flex classes of when they are in person to have a mask and social distance, and that seating will be set out in a socially distant way, whether it's a seat in between or what have you, and the expectation is for students to wear masks. I think in the first day of class is another opportunity to talk about what the expectations might be. But I think that initial email going out is going to be a good way to frame the conversation up front, that the students know that we are going to be taking this seriously and this will be a part of the class experience for the fall. The other thing that we might have the opportunity to address in that email to students early on is the 10 minutes before class and the 10 minutes after class. So as students come to class, we probably have all seen what tends to happen, that they might congregate in the hallway right outside the classroom door. Some sit and get on their laptops, some stand, some socialize. There's all kinds of different things that happens before and after class. It might not be bad to mention students that as you come into class, don't get there early, plan to get there on time. No earlier than 10 minutes before will be sufficient. And we might even delay the start of class just to allow everybody time to get into class in a safe and healthy way. And the same as we leave class, you might want to dismiss parts of your class seating first, and then the other sections as you go, to allow for the opportunity for people to exit the classroom without any type of congregating or gathering taking place. And that I hope might help and serve as a reminder to everybody that we need to make sure that we are distancing. So in the classroom, it is possible that a faculty member may not wear a mask and may have a face shield on instead of the mask. And as long as the instructor or faculty member is removed more than 6 feet away from the students, that should be completely fine. And for our students with a hearing disability, that might be very appropriate and appreciated by them to be able to see the mouth of the instructor or faculty member in the event that they lip read, which many of them will lip read. So, but our students, even if they're socially distant in the class, the expectation would still be to wear the mask in class. Now, the only time where a student may not have a mask on is if the student has a medical condition or health condition that it would be to their detriment medically to wear a mask. And those kind of accommodations, if you will, are made through the Student Disability Services Office. So if any student has a medical condition, and there has been information already put out telling students that if they might classify in that particular category, that they need to contact Student Disability Services prior to their first class. The other possible exception, which I think would be very rare, is if it's not necessarily a student with a disability or a medical condition, but there might be something else. The Office of Dean of Students can vet those requests and determine whether it's appropriate or not in concert with Student Disability Services. I have heard that there may be a concern surrounding face masks based on faith. After pretty extensive research this summer, we have not been able to identify any faith that would have a problem with a student wearing a face mask for the purposes of class and maintaining one's personal health. But any type of request surrounding masks or concerns about wearing masks can be funneled through Student Disability Services or to the Office of the Dean of Students. Naturally, I think our students just need structure. They need to know what to expect. They need to know what the expectations are of them and our requirements of them in our class. And then they just need to know, that they're going to be held to it. So if a student shows up to class and they do not have a mask, I would approach that in an educational way and just say, hi, is there some reason of why you may not have your mask on you today? Not making any assumptions that they forgot it or they don't want to wear it. Maybe very easily they just left their room or left their apartment or their home and forgot to bring their mask with them. So I would say in a non-accusatory way, is there any reason why you may not have your mask with you today? And I am planning on having a little supply of disposable masks with me when I go teach my class. I think that is a good recommendation. If you don't have a supply of masks with you, it might be helpful to know where in the building that you're teaching might have a supply of masks. Because what I would do is ask the student to leave, go get the mask, and here's some possible locations where you could find some that are relatively close, and then come back and join us. That we would love to have you back in class once you get a mask. And that easy, that simple, non-confrontational, very matter of fact, and I think that would be completely fine. Now, if a student refuses or says, no, I'm not, or whatever, we would ask that student to leave the class and say, well, it is an expectation not only of this class, but of our university and our Texas Tech University system for everyone wearing masks. So we would ask that you have a mask here. If you do not want to wear one, I'm going to ask you to leave class, and you'd be responsible for anything that you miss in terms of the content of the course for this day. And that would be a shame. I would like to say that we could work through this and you could comply and we would be able to get you back in class and you won't miss anything. How's that sound? Why don't you go get that mask for us? And I'll even wait on you until you come back, or we'll help you get caught up in what you might miss. Now, unfortunately, we might have a student who may become a little bit more aggressive or digging themselves in, indignant that they're not going to wear the mask. And in that case, I would give them one warning saying, well, it is an expectation that you wear a mask. I understand that you do not want to wear one. However, for you to be present in this class, the expectation is that you do wear a mask. If you choose not to wear one, not only will I ask you to leave the class, but I am going to refer you to the Office of Student Conduct, and they will follow up with you. So again, I think we can work through this. I don't see any reason why you couldn't wear a mask for the class. I think that would be fine. It's a respectful way to treat your fellow classmates, and it protects yourself too, and it protects me. So again, how about we get that mask for you? That would be kind of an example of how I would go about doing it. If a student becomes more disruptive to the point that you are unable to teach your class or the students are unable to learn, and it's that disruptive, then that would be a referral where I would make to student conduct for sure for classroom disruption. We could also call TTPD if it's getting elevated or escalated to the point where you feel uncomfortable. They will respond to those types of calls. Texas Tech Police will not be coming to enforce mask compliance per se, but they will respond to more elevated, egregious concerns that we might have in terms of classroom disruption. With that, I think that is most of the areas that I wanted to hit on. Our students are wanting personal connections. They're wanting a true residential class or experience this fall. That's why they're here on campus. That's why they're wanting to take in-person classes. And I think to the best of our ability, while maintaining the safety and health for our class in terms of the distancing and masks, we want to try to provide those personal connections, not only among peers, but with us as instructors. And the better we can do that, the better the experience will be for the course. So unless there's questions in the chat, or Suzanne, if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer specifically. That's kind of what I wanted to cover. In terms of the compliance in the Office of Conduct, we want to educate, provide warnings, ample opportunities, and a very educational, nice, polite, respectful type of approach first. And then only if the person is repetitively not willing to comply or becoming nasty about it do we want to send it to student conduct. So we're hoping that 9 times out of 10, the student is going to comply and understand the levity of the situation and the need to protect the safety and health of all of us.
Thanks, Matt. There was a question in the chat from Holly. I'm going to go back to that. And she asked, have students received any guidelines on those 10 minutes between classes, like the congregating between outside the door, that kind of thing?
Yes, there has been some information that has gone out about arriving on time for class, not early for class, to avoid gathering. However, I will acknowledge that the students have received a lot of information over the summer. So it will be important to reiterate. That's why I think that email from you as the instructor to your students in advance of the class to remind them about that 10 minutes before, 10 minutes after might be very helpful.
Okay, and then Sean asked, you touched on this a little bit, but let's just reiterate. Sean asked, what should we do if the student refuses to leave the classroom?
Right. I mean, if you have a situation where the student just will not move and leave, in my mind, I would say, I'm unable to let you stay here because you don't have your mask on. It is a requirement, not only for this course, but for the university. Should you not remove yourself, I will have to contact Texas Tech Police Department to come to class. I'd hate to do that and hopefully garner their compliance. And if you don't, then we call Texas Tech Police.
Okay. I hope it does not escalate to anything like that. I know none of us want to go there.
Me too.
Any other questions? You're welcome to unmute your mic and ask, or you can drop a question in the chat.
And I'm available for more questions that anybody can be happy to reach out to me if need be.
Okay. Jay is asking, my class has 80 minutes. So he's a Tuesday, Thursday class, I'm guessing. Should I have a 5-minute break in the middle? If so, should I ask the student not to move? I'm not following that, Jay. Let's tackle the 5-minute break in the middle. Yesterday at new faculty orientation, even Dr. Stewart said, gosh, I've been sitting in the audience for 15 minutes with my mask on, and it's hard. It's hard to do. It's a little bit uncomfortable, and we acknowledge that. So a 5-minute break in the middle, Jay, I'm not sure how it would serve the purpose of giving your students a break from the mask, because they need to wear it even if they step outside the classroom. Matt, do you have any thoughts about this?
I don't see any reason why we can't do one of the old stand up, stretch, put your arms out, put your arms above your head, breathe in deep through your nose, out through your mouth, kind of do like a little relaxation break. I think that would be completely fine. And then if 1 or 2 students need to excuse themselves for whatever reason, they're welcome to do so. But we would ask that the whole class, for the most part, stay here unless you must leave, and then, do so individually.
Yeah, I like that answer, Matt. Okay.
Good
Anyone
question.
else? All righty, Matt, you just have a big time at the law school. We hope that goes well. Thanks for being here today.
For sure, thank you.
All right, we're going to keep going then. Oh, look at that. Okay, so now we are going to talk about the syllabus, and we are going to talk about some things that you might do on your syllabus, some required and suggested elements. So first, let's think about 2 required elements. I want to tell you that on the TLPDC website, we have an addendum to our syllabi white papers that is written just for fall 2020. And I will send a link to all of you after this session it lists these required elements that should go in your syllabus. So that might be helpful to you, and I will definitely include this. The first required element that we should all have on our syllabi is the contingency plan that addresses what happens should the university need to pivot again because of health concerns related to COVID-19. So this contingency plan essentially asks what your students would need to have access to if we move to a remote teaching environment again. You know, clearly this contingency is written towards a face-to-face or hybrid class. So if you are already online, may I suggest to you, this is my interpretation, and Justin and Meredith, you can jump right in here, but there may be some students who don't have consistent access to technology. Maybe they're using someone else's Wi-Fi or computer, and should we go to an all remote environment, they might need to find better access or find better equipment that is consistently available to them. For our students who are face-to-face or remote, obviously they're going to have to switch their learning modality. So we need to make sure that they know what they need. Thanks, Carrie. Carrie just dropped that link into the chat. So that's the document that I was talking about that gives you complete access to these required elements. Okay. Oh, and Professor Hogan just said that Costa Rica is 100% online. So look at you. You don't even have to have this. You've kind of got it already. Alrighty. It's also suggested, I want to point out with this contingency plan, that you list this at the top of your syllabus. So I just dropped this right into the top of mine, in the front, I should say. And then here's the second required element. This is the illness-based absence policy. We're all asked to also include this in our syllabi. This basically tells students what they need to do if they don't feel well, whether that is related to COVID-19 or it is related to symptoms other than COVID-19. I'm going to stop right here. This is a long piece of text, so I'm going to take a breath and stop and let you look at this and see if we have questions.
Suzanne, may I ask you something in the meantime, or I shouldn't?
Of course, jump in.
So I have 360 people online. Okay, so I don't want to jump in the discussion here because I have another class face-to-face. Anyway,
Wow.
so my experience is that people are using illness as an excuse before exams. And I'm telling you this for the 360 students experience. So let me turn on my camera. So I don't know how I will be handling, you know, this particular period and excuses. I feel I may have this or the other. I know that there is no way straightforward and an answer on this. I'm not expecting this, but I'm really worried if I had 15 students out of 360 in regular times to accommodate and, you know, assign other times for exams and, you know,
Right.
then I expect, I don't know, 50 now, you know what I mean, in any single exam. So I don't know if this is something that there has been some discussion or anything. I know that there is no like straightforward way to address this, but I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, that's a really difficult situation, and I empathize with you. I don't know that I have a perfect solution to that. Of course, there will be students who will take advantage. You know, this is, I don't know how to avoid that. I'm going to open this up to others and see if others have good solutions. I always lean towards wanting to think the best of my students, you know, and hoping that
I do the same up to the date of the exam, you know, or up to the evening before the exam. Then suddenly everybody gets sick, you know, the evening before the exam, or all the relatives die, you know, you cannot imagine, but anyway.
No, I believe you. I completely believe you. I think, you know, one strategy that's in the back of my mind is to consider what your makeup exam looks like. and to suggest to your students, I'm aware that there may be a temptation, I don't know, maybe to be transparent about what you anticipate and to say the makeup exam is difficult. You know, I mean, I'm thinking of a little bit of a scare tactic there. I don't know if that's the most thoughtful kind of teaching, but maybe it's a different format. Maybe it's a slightly different format. I don't want to penalize students who are truly ill. So I'm not suggesting, something drastic, but if you saw this to be a problem, gosh.
Maybe like assign a project instead of an actual exam that will take them a bit longer. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll think about that.
So
I'll think about that. I don't have a great solution. Justin, do you have one?
well,
Sean Mitchell here. I had a thought.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sean. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry to cut you off there, Justin. So I have the illness-based policy that's on the screen here in my syllabus that's more tailored to COVID, but I also retained my standard illness policy about having a doctor's note and making up within 1 week if they're not sick related to COVID. And my plan is if they indicate that they think they've been exposed to COVID or have COVID symptoms, I plan to emphasize that there will be some extensive communication on their part with different departments of the university related to that, and discourage them from stating that lightly, essentially. That, like, you know, if you're going to say that you were exposed to COVID or that you have tested positive or that you have symptoms, then we have to start making these reports to people for contact tracing and keeping up with this. If that's not your situation, you might be ill otherwise, then we can follow my standard illness policy that's kind of a 1 week makeup window with a doctor's note and things like that. So that's the approach I'm taking. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or suggestions that may be better to build on that.
So Sean, I think that the policy that you're talking about is really similar to what's on the screen towards the bottom of the screen that says if you're ill and it's not COVID related. And this does suggest that you must have a return to school note indicating that you have seen some kind of healthcare provider. So that's another layer that a student would need to go through instead of just saying, I don't feel well. There would need to be documentation, you know, that they had been in contact with a healthcare provider. Now, we've got a couple of points in the chat that I think are interesting. And Meredith, I think you could speak to this. We do have this new IT self-reporting platform. Perhaps you could address that. We're going to see it on some other pages here,
Okay.
some slides that follow. And maybe you could talk about, you and Justin might have more information for Holly as well, related to notification to faculty about when they would find out if a student has tested positive.
I'd like to just kind of jump in on the question about testing.
Okay.
With 300 students in an online class and people coming up ill the day of the exam. One of the best ways to do exams in an online course is, of course, is giving students a window in which to take it, either 24 or 48 hours. So that, yes, if they come up ill, you know, the day of the test, it's amazing how miraculous so many illnesses we can heal from in 24 hours. So what I would say is one thing for online exams is to give students that 24 or 48 hour window, so that they know that anytime between, you know, 12:01 a.m. on Tuesday and 11:59 p.m. on Thursday, they can take the exam. I would also say that you put in there that the exam, you know, has a time limit of X amount of time. And that way, yes, if they are ill, they know, okay, you know, I've got 2 days to take it and I have to take it within an hour. You know, depending on what they're sick with, you know, they can find that hour. That also gives them plenty of time too, as Suzanne was talking about, to see a medical professional. And if the medical professional says, you need to be in bed for the next week, now they've got their doctor's note and they can send it to you. And then you can schedule that makeup test. But of course, all of that will need to be in your syllabi. You know, what I've seen many online faculty do is say they give 3 exams throughout the semester and then a final at the end. What they have told students in syllabi is if you miss one of the other exams, your final will count for not only the final, but also one of the other unit exams in the class. And you know, they also, a lot of times the final is comprehensive. And so they're telling students, you know, you have this comprehensive test at the end, you can take it and it can count twice, or you can take one of the unit exams. So those types of things might help, you know, because we all get sick. And I mean, so there very definitely could be a time when a student can't take an exam. But giving them a long enough window so that if they need to see a doctor or a healthcare provider, they can provide you with a note and then you can go forward with that. And what I'd also do in your syllabi is to put in there that something about, you know, if you have an issue with the exam, you need to contact me before 11:59 when it's due. So if a student has come up ill and they email you the minute before the exam is due, that you can't help them then. So put in there something about, you know, if you are ill and you're unable to, or you have technology issues or you're unable to take the exam for some reason, you know, be sure you email me when there's plenty of time before it's over, you know, before it closes.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you.
Meredith?
Yes.
So I wonder if you could respond to a few of these questions in the
Yes.
chat. And I'm going to put forward this disclaimer. Meredith and Justin and I, none of us are claiming to be the sole expert. So we're definitely, if we don't have a specific answer to a question today, we'll get it. We'll find it and we'll follow up with the group. But
And
Meredith?
one thing I'm learning is that it changes. So things are changing very rapidly with COVID response. And so sometimes we have to be able to pivot, as Suzanne said earlier, and kind of make adjustments. So I will try to answer the best to my knowledge. So Holly asked, I think, if it was possible, we may not know if a student tests positive for days or weeks. In theory, it wouldn't be weeks. It would probably be closer to days. But if a student has tested for COVID, or anyone has tested for COVID, they should be isolating until they receive that result. In the case that they could possibly be positive, because they could be showing, or they could be spreading the virus essentially, and without even realizing it. So that's the answer to that question. As far as the quarantine that Jay asked about, so if a student, and I little contact, that's kind of the tricky part about that. Usually a contact tracer will contact someone if they are considered a high risk contact to a person. Now, this person may already realize that they're a high-risk contact if they're living in the household, for example, with someone that tests positive, or if they know I visited with my grandfather and we sat for an hour and talked and we were more than 6 feet, like closer than 6 feet, we didn't have masks on. It's probably a pretty good indication that they were a high-risk contact. And if that is the case, then they should be quarantining for 14 days. Because the virus, the research has shown, can show up anywhere from 2 days to 14 days after exposure. And that's why that 14-day mark is so critical. So that's the answer to that question. And then
actually, yes, the student talked to me saying that he just quickly dropped off some tools in his grandfather's house. So he said he thinks he thought it was very little contact.
okay.
And
So
after that, he did the COVID test and it is negative.
And they can still test negative even if they've been exposed and show symptoms later. What you may do in that case, if you're concerned or if they have questions, is you may ask them to contact student health or contact their primary care physician just to get some additional information to ensure that they are at ease with the situation and that you are at ease as well.
Okay, Sounds great. Thank you.
Yeah. And then on this illness-based absence policy that's listed here, I was going to mention, and I know Suzanne mentioned the new reporting platform. So the new IT COVID management system that went out, there was an announcement this week, I believe, has the positive reporting form on there. And so if a student tests positive, they will need to self-report using that positive reporting form. And that will help start the contact tracing process for the university. So it's really important that they report. So if they report that to you, then please ask them if they have reported it using the management system, and if not, encourage them to do that.
Meredith, can you drop a link in the chat to that new IT reporting system? That might be
right
of interest to others.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Are there any other questions about the illness-based policy? Okay, I'm going to keep moving forward. We can always come back here if we need to, but we'll go ahead and keep going. All right, so yesterday in the FAQ put out by the Office of the Provost, it was suggested that faculty might need to address a few other things in their syllabi. We do not have specific statements for you. You can find all of this information in that FAQ that went out. Just in case you didn't see that, perhaps Meredith or Justin could drop that in the chat right now, a link to that. So
it's the same link that I just sent. It just has 3 different options on there, so
perfect.
they can use one of those 3 options.
Thank you very much. So from that FAQ yesterday, we want to be able to include in our syllabi information about how students can get tested. So Dr. Stewart, I spoke with Rob this morning, and he suggested that you pull language from the FAQ. This is the language that he's referencing right here. Again, I'll send you this PowerPoint after the session. You might use this exact language. This is a link to that self-screening tool that gives students the ability to go through a screening process with the app. That is, there's a quick process and then a more detailed process, and then a reference to a healthcare provider if necessary. This platform also gives students, faculty, and staff the ability to report a positive COVID-19 result, particularly for those who receive that diagnosis from an off-campus medical provider. So in other words, someone that does not go through the student health center. We have to report those positive diagnoses again so that we can start that contact tracing and make sure that we keep others who've been in contact with individuals as safe as possible. So we want to recommend this language or something similar to it from that FAQ. Let's see, Justin, your comment says, I like the 72-hour, okay, you're talking about the testing with 72 hours. That's, yeah, I agree. It's especially good for over the weekend.
Online course testing, not COVID-19 testing.
Yeah. There's so much testing. All right, I'm going to keep going. Remember that you can always jump in. Okay, here's another thing that we should be addressing on our syllabi as recommended yesterday from that FAQ. Of course, we're taking so many measures as an institution with our social distancing, with sanitation protocols, but we also need to be mindful and aware that some students may be at a higher risk for COVID than others. So some students might live with someone who has a compromising health condition. Perhaps they have some kind of underlying health condition. And we need to make accommodations for these students if they request it. Basically what this information says is that the instructor of record has permission in coordination with their department chairs, with academic advisors, with academic associate deans, to be flexible with instructional accommodations for students who are at a higher risk. So these kind of accommodations might include things like an alternative to a face-to-face group assignment. It might be a remote learning option, maybe an online learning option. It might be that a student has an independent study, same course objectives, but an independent study. It could be that there is a course that could be substituted that's offered online that basically meets the same degree requirements as the original course. There are a few things that we are asked to keep in mind as instructor of record. If the requested accommodation makes a substantive alteration of the course material or the course objectives, then that's problematic. If the accommodation provides an equally effective alternative to the original objectives or activities, right? Or whether the accommodation could be uniformly applied to others if more people need that accommodation. Those are three things that you need to keep in mind. You have the authorization as instructor of record to address these three requirements and to think of a solution. Again, we want to emphasize that you might want to contact your academic associate dean for guidance related to this kind of accommodation. Let me give you an example, and Mitzi, you can jump in here if you fill in the dots a little bit more than I do because you know of this. We have a colleague who is teaching a Rater Ready section and has already been asked by a student, perhaps at higher risk, if the student could have an alternative delivery. So for this particular course, I believe that the instructor is planning to perhaps open a Zoom meeting and include the student in that way. The class is taught face-to-face, right? But she's going to open a Zoom meeting and include the student for now because the student is currently higher risk than others. So it still needs.
I feel like it would be sustainable for a period of time, Suzanne, but as you said, you know, looking at the course objectives and what we are able to do as far as face-to-face instruction with our masks, being mindful of all the policies and, you know, the Zoom, that's a lot. So
it is a lot.
Yeah, I think we'd have to balance that and then determine much further what the best course of action would be for the student.
So I would hope that you wouldn't have a lot of students requesting this. This is indicated for our higher risk students, but it is possible, and this should be addressed in some way on your syllabi. So again, you can pull from this wording to include something about requesting accommodations for students who are higher risk. I'll pause there for a moment, see if there are any questions. And we're going to move on because we still have quite a bit we want to talk about and our time is going quickly. So let's think about if you're teaching face-to-face. One thing that we need to address if you're teaching face-to-face is seating assignments. So the purpose of having seating assignments in the class is to assist in that contact tracing should we have a student who tests positive for COVID-19. It is your responsibility as instructor to set up the seating assignments and to submit a seating chart to your academic department. You'll need to keep a copy. You'll need to submit one to your academic department. I've dropped a link in here, and Carrie can put that in the chat as well, for a link to the TLPDC. In cooperation with the Operations Division, we have included many classroom layouts as well as an Excel template, and we have a set of instructions on that page. That's a template that allows you to easily create a seating chart. So I would like to recommend that you visit that page and know that we are adding classroom layouts. I think even an hour ago, they added maybe 12 more. So we're adding those as quickly as we can. Many of the classrooms on campus are already there. If you're teaching in a studio or a lab or a performance venue, if students don't have a specified seat, then you'll need to give a location chart that basically says where students might be standing. You know, you'll need to be creative there, and being aware of where your students are located, again, for the purpose of contact tracing in the event of a positive test. We also know that enrollment will change. It's quite likely, and you would need to keep that updated and adjusted if your enrollment changes in your course.
Suzanne, may I ask you something
Of
again?
course.
Should we keep attendance, not penalize anybody for not being there, but should we keep attendance in case of, you know, a case? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah, I absolutely do.
Some kind of, I know it will be tricky for larger classes, but I don't know larger classes if they are all, you know, in one day, or if the instructor chose to split them, you know, like half on Tuesdays, half on Thursdays, and so on. So maybe it's manageable by all instructors that we chose to go face-to-face in this case. But I don't know if we should keep track of when everybody was in class also, other than where was sitting, or if this makes things more complicated. In any case, if we have a case, then all people around that person will be informed. If you weren't in class that day, that's fine. If you were,
Yeah,
guide you and authorities what to do. I don't know.
you know, I'm gonna give an answer that's not gonna be very popular, but I'm gonna say it depends. I think that depends on the size of your class, the amount of assistance that you have. You know, if you have a graduate teaching assistant helping you take attendance, then it might be more doable. But my goodness, we have a lot of things to be responsible for, and I feel like the contact tracing could likely follow up on this based on your seating chart and say, were you in class this day? Were you present? And that could answer the question of whether a student was exposed or not. So I'm going to say this is a personal decision. Justin or Meredith, do you have a different suggestion there?
I would agree with you. The other thing I would add, and it's taking a recommendation that the TLPDC has put out for Zoom, is to come up with maybe an online form that you can share the link in class every day, and students can just click on that or go to that website and write their name in as being attending that day in class. That way you have an ongoing list of who has attended, but you can also use that, as TLPDC makes a great suggestion, to have students interact back on the content provided in the course. And I believe that was on, I'll put the link in the chat to the TLPDC. It's the recommendation on the Zoom breakout rooms. But at the bottom, there's one about, I believe there's one about
Attendance.
Attendance, yes.
Yeah.
Worked hard today.
That'd be great if you would drop that in the chat. That's a good idea, Justin. Okay, we'll keep moving on. One thing that we've heard a lot of questions about is the idea of who keeps the class clean, who's helping us with the sanitation of the class, and we're really asking for, the university is asking for faculty and staff to take on some ownership here. I've dropped some pictures onto this slide to show you what you might expect in the classroom. The first one you see there is a bucket with some wipes where students could wipe down their individual desk. Faculty are asked to wipe down lecterns and spaces that they touch, both before and after teaching. You can obtain supplies through your own college. You see a student wellness station, a picture of the wellness station there, and zoom in of the QR code that you can scan if the supplies in the wellness station need to be refreshed. So the wellness station should contain some extra masks, some hand sanitizer, and some wipes. Again, we're asking that students and faculty join in this effort to keep those spaces clean and wipe down their areas. Okay, the next thing on my list, if you're teaching face-to-face, is an exit procedure. This is one of those things that I really think will become a part of our pattern after the first few times that we do this. You need to have an exit process, and this should be established on the first day of class. Gosh, in a welcome email that you send out your students, you might even tell them, we're going to have a certain way that we leave the class, and we'll practice it on the first day, and we'll all get used to it. If you have multiple doorways into your classroom, they should be marked entrance and exit. What I would recommend is, this might work for you. You could use, it's not done, it's kind of interesting, but you could use the metaphor of how we exit an area after a wedding or after a funeral in a Western tradition, where we start row by row and leave the room. So it's recommended that you dismiss from the back of the classroom row by row, telling students that they have to keep their facial coverings on and still maintain social distancing. And we'll just take a little bit of patience there to leave the room. So really important. And we did this at new faculty orientation yesterday. I actually thought it was really easy. It didn't take long at all. Everybody kind of got used to it, even with just 2 times. So it wasn't that bad. And then one other thing I want to mention is the room setup. If you're teaching face-to-face, if your room is a rater room, you can contact the operations division. You might specifically contact Patricia Vitella. Carrie can type that in the chat there. But I've put a link here to the operation division staff. Patricia is responsible for those rater-ready rooms. And if you have questions about the way that it's laid out and you're concerned about the social distancing in the room, thanks, Justin, you could speak with Tricia. If the room is not a rater room, it's probably managed by the department, and you need to visit with the department about the room layout instead. So I'm going to switch now our conversation, again being cognizant of time. We have just a few things we wanted to pay attention to in thinking about an online or hybrid teaching modality. I'm going to walk through these, and I'm going to ask Justin just to jump right in with me. Justin, especially thinking about a welcome announcement or email to send before the class starts, maybe a welcome video or an announcement video is a different way to do that. What are your thoughts about that?
You bet. Carrie, would you mind if I shared my screen? And Suzanne, do you mind if I share something real fast here?
Please do.
Okay. So what I
be able to.
Okay, what I do with my class is I send a welcome announcement to all of my students, and I'm going to show you the one actually I sent out to one of my classes today, actually just a little while ago. And so what I do is in my welcome announcement, I tell the students exactly how the course structure will look to them in Blackboard. I tell them what everything is in Blackboard, where they can go to find certain things. I tell them how to contact me for course questions. And what I found is that many times students email me course questions, but they're general in nature. And so I tell them here that if you please use a discussion board so that everybody in the class has that information. I tell them how long it will take me to respond to their emails or questions. I give them information on grades. And then the important thing, especially for asynchronous classes, is if that you are going to meet with them via Zoom or Collaborate as part of their course, to let them know those dates before the semester gets started, if they were not included in Banner when they signed up. And so it's just a very general email that kind of gives them overview of the course, how it's set up, and how some of the mechanics will work in class. I also try to follow this up with an email telling students what the first week will look like and what their textbook may or may not be. Because although we've turned them into the bookstore, that doesn't mean students have looked at the bookstore for their textbook. And so if you want them to have it before the class gets started, I send that and I send it as a follow-up, because what I found is that if I put it in this long welcome email, they may or may not see it. So I send it as a follow-up, say, this is the textbook, the first week, partially to alleviate some of their stress, I tell them the first week is going to be a welcome discussion board, time for you to get familiar with the course and start reading in the textbook. And then I tell them week 2 is when I start with lectures and assignments and like that. So it gives them that little bit of time to get familiar with the class and then move forward with everything. I do it that way because it's quick and easy. A student can look at it on their phone or whatever they have. As Suzanne said, a video is very good as well, but sometimes that takes a little bit longer, and so I may follow up with a video just in the class itself, not emailed out to students.
Thanks, Justin. I'm going to go back to this PowerPoint. One sec. Okay, and we're talking still about welcoming your students, particularly in that online or hybrid environment. And one thing I wanted to also bring up was, and Justin, you've mentioned this even, was that idea of an introduction via discussion board, maybe as being something you do in that first week. So I wanted to share a specific example of how I've used an introductory post in a discussion. We've all probably seen introductory posts that say, tell the class about yourself, tell us about your major, your interest, your career goals, that kind of thing. And I like that. I invite my students to share a picture if they're comfortable. I typically share a picture as well. But I've also been experimenting with a very different kind of post. And I've put the prompts here because I think students are sometimes weary of that classic introduction post. So this is an assignment that I learned from a colleague at Cornell. He calls it Where I'm From. And he asks students to free write in response to these 4 prompts. I'm from, and then to list a smell or a sight or something geographical that represents them. I'm from, and then a food that they're familiar with or that they like. I'm from, maybe a saying that represents them, or people. Just to free write this, it's really kind of poetry, if you will. I wouldn't tell students that. They might get a little bit intimidated by this. But I have tried this with several classes, and I have learned things about my students that I likely never would have learned otherwise. For example, students have told me, I am from a household with a young child. Maybe they're a caretaker and have responsibilities are there. Or maybe they are a non-native speaker and they suggest I'm from, and they say something that they hear in their home often. So it's a way that you can get insight into your students and their backgrounds that may be of interest to you. So you could even combine those, ask students to tell you the traditional information, the classic information about themselves, and then maybe something creative like this. The point is to build that engagement and interaction, not only from you to the students, but student to student, and have them get to know each other in community online. So we really want to encourage you to try some kind of introductory strategy like this in your online classes right from the beginning. And then Justin, I want to tackle this last thing before we wrap up our time together today, and that is talking about cameras. Recently on the TLPDC social media, we posted this quote talking about asking students, requiring students to have their cameras on in an online synchronous setting. We had lots and lots of feedback. You chimed in on this, and I wanted to see if you could talk about your thoughts about requiring students to have the camera on.
Right. This is a hot button issue. So it kind of depends on a number of things. I teach smaller classes, 15 to 20 students, and so if I have all of them on camera, I can probably see their faces. But it can be seen as intrusive by your students. What I said, I think, in the TLPDC response was that maybe you don't require students to have their video on the entire time. Maybe you ask them to turn their video on when they are speaking, presenting, or asking a question. The same thing with their microphone. One, it cuts down on the distractions. And although, you know, all summer we've probably all been in meetings and animals and children have come in and out of the picture, which is great, but it could be distracting for some of our students that may suffer from ADD or ADHD, you know, seeing multiple things pop up on a screen. So I would say, you know, one thing to do is think about that, and you might have that discussion with your class on your first Zoom meeting or Collaborate meeting, is to talk about the use of cameras. The other thing is that if we don't tell our students before the class starts that they have to have a camera, they may or may not have it. And although we think about this population of students, Generation Z particularly, as growing up with the internet and access to technology, that doesn't mean they're comfortable using different parts of technology. So asking them to be on camera may not be something they've ever done or been comfortable with. So that's one thing to think about, is kind of having that conversation with your students, and then that's an ongoing thing. As Suzanne said, you know, what we're trying to do is build community in the class. You can do that in many ways, not just on video and through audio, but also in discussion boards and projects and group interaction.
Thanks, Justin. So I'm not going to walk through this right now in the interest of time, but I do want to point out that there's one more slide that gives you some possible solutions to how you might talk about the camera dilemma, if you will, in the class, in your online class. I think our main point here is that you should address this from the very beginning and talk with your students about your expectations. So we're right at the end of our time here today. I want to thank you so much for joining us and being here. We will follow up with some materials. If you have questions and you'd like to stick online with us, we'd be glad to answer those right now. But otherwise, I want to say thanks for your time. I hope everybody gets a breath over the weekend and takes a little bit of a break. And here we go next week. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.